Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Hashim Kumar. As the Munich Security Conference kicks off, all eyes are on how the Trump administration's foreign policy will reshape global security, with European leaders facing demands for increased defense spending and uncertainty over US commitments to NATO and Ukraine. What should we expect? Joining us today is Ellias Aghili Dehnavi from the Abhaseed Foundation Fund to discuss Europe's security future, shifting alliances, and the potential for a Ukraine peace deal. Welcome, sir, to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much. A very big hi to our audience.
Say again.
Thank you so much for the invitation and a very big hi to our audience.
Thank you very much for that. So, look, give us an overview of what we expect or should expect from the Munich summit.
Well, actually, we are witnessing a very important turning point in the contemporary history of the Ukraine war. So, after 2022 invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, I can say that today, or the past few days, have been really decisive and determining in the course of the war. So we are witnessing a change of rhetoric. If our audience has noticed, there's been a very drastic fluctuation in the rhetorics proposed by the European leaders. And this is actually a side effect of the American narration that's been circulating for the past 5 days. Technically speaking, the Americans are trying to kind of alleviate the pressure on their shoulders by dividing the tasks, and by tasks I'm referring to the economic tasks of supporting Ukraine. So the Europeans country and the specifically speaking, the Western European countries and allies are expected to increase their share of support. And this increase in share of the support is being imposed on them by the politicians in Washington, D.C.
But this is not new, is it? I mean, Trump has been saying that since his first term in 2016. And yet the European leaders have not really taken it terribly seriously. Do you think it'll be any different this time?
Well, it's like on the let me explain this by referring to the Ramstein gathering on February 12th. We can see that the Americans have been trying to reduce their presence by giving the role of negotiations to the British counterparts. So this can be a very important move and gesture by the Americans. I brought up this example to build on my assumption regarding the reduction in the American roles and the seriousness, as you've kind of mentioned, the seriousness of events. So we are seeing that in practice, the Americans are trying to kind of reduce their presence and involvement in the ground. And we have to wait and see about the statements results in the Munich summit, Munich Security Summit, to see how the European allies and the Americans are integrating or disintegrating. But at this point, and based on the fresh facts that we all have witnessed, I guess Trump is really serious to stop the war, not to cut the support or not to put the pressure on the European Union at this moment.
Right, so it's much more about stopping the war, as you say. They're still committed to NATO, in your opinion, but they want Europe to take a bigger share of the budget. I mean, they've also said, Trump has also said, and Pete Hegseth again said that really what America wants to be focusing on is China and the Pacific. Could that be the motivator behind the American policy towards NATO in Europe?
That indeed is the point blank, and I wanted to refer to this very important point that Americans are trying to focus on their own problems, so they need to take care of and address all the other problems and all the other international fuss and chaos that is hindering their focus and concentration on the Eastern Asia and the Pacific. So actually, the focus of the Americans, and specifically Donald Trump at this point, is to stop the war rather than talking with the European Union countries to, okay, this is your share, this is our share. These problems are to be sorted out after the end of the war, because he doesn't want to shatter this multilateral concentration on the matters in Ukraine. Any discussion regarding the increase in the share of the European Unions will result in the destruction of the integration of all these allies. And you're absolutely right. The focus is now mostly on bigger problems that are lying in more far parts of the world.
Understood. Now, America, I mean, again, Pete Hegseth has made it quite clear, as has Trump, that really there isn't a place in NATO for Ukraine. At the same time, they're offering security guarantees to Ukraine. How do you read those two messages?
Well, this is a balance of rhetoric, I call it. Rather than a balance of power, this is a balance of rhetoric. So you give them something and you take something from them in order to keep the balance. Donald Trump is a very, successful trader. So he's got a handful of experiences when it comes to trade. So he's a masterful negotiator. He knows what to do. He's exactly practicing what he has learned in business. So he's offering something, and at the same time, he's trying to get something else in order to keep the balance. Because this is a very weak form of offshore balancing. And what do I mean by offshore balancing? I mean that the Americans are trying to support their allies, and in this case, the European Union countries and Ukraine, from Washington, D.C. So they're supporting them and telling them, okay, we support you, but this is your own responsibility to take care of your security.
Right. Okay. So Europe has to take the lead on this. Now, President Trump has had conversations both with Putin and Zelensky. Clearly, no one really knows what happened in those talks, but they will have an influence on the American approach in Munich at the conference. What do you think? How do those pieces come together? What do you think is likely?
Well, definitely the phone call and the discussion that President Donald Trump had with his counterparts have been at least on the paper, or at least in front of the cameras, successful. I was just listening to the German, Chancellor discussion and interview regarding the war in Ukraine, and I could easily discern and feel the change in his rhetoric and the German, for instance, foreign policy. I brought up this instance to talk about the effects that the discussion had on the whole condition, not only on the Russian Federation, not only on Ukraine, but also on the other important, big, crucial players. German Chancellor was talking about peace talks. He was talking about the end to the war in Ukraine. And this is something that we haven't explicitly had during the past, a few months or even past few years. So we can see that these phone discussions and these, pieces of negotiations are gradually making a whole comprehensive, visible puzzle. And that puzzle finally should, and if we look at the incidents from an American perspective, must lead to not a perpetual but an explicit peace.
Understood. So the conversation has certainly changed. It's become more focused on peace since Trump's inauguration, and hopefully that momentum will carry it through to a positive outcome. Now, talking about Russia's negotiating position, the Russian economy is already on a war footing. Lots of resources being allocated to supporting the invasion of Ukraine, which makes it an ever more dangerous foe for the rest of Europe, but it also means that Russia is in a more powerful bargaining position in any peace talks. Would you agree?
Well, this is really hard to kind of analyze, or let's say it's really hard to have a very nuanced and detailed analysis in that regard, because this kind of energy wars or energy sanctions is a kind of a lose-lose game, or let's say a game with a zero sum, because at the same time, here in Europe, we are buying the gas with much higher price, and at the same time, the Russian Federation is losing one of its most important bazaar for exporting its gas, and we know that the Russian Federation is regarded to be some sort of a rentier of a state. So most of their federal budget is being kind of provided through the sale of natural resources, and most specifically gas. They've been, as you've clearly and correctly mentioned, they have been suffering from a loss in the budget, and this is directly related to the export of the energy to Central and Western Europe. So energy plays a very important role and is a good incentive for the Russian Federation. But as I've said, it's just a good incentive. It's not a crucial geopolitical factor, because geopolitics here play a very, much more important role. And by speaking of geopolitics, I'm talking about the affinity and the proximity of the, NATO to the Russian borders, and also the world wants Russia to give guarantees.
Understood. And unfortunately, Mr. Dehnavi, we're going to have to end there. But thank you so much for coming along and sharing your expertise with our audience. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is always mine, and let's hope for a peaceful world.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's all from us on this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. As always, lots more coming up. Goodbye.